We are starting chapter and the final chapter, 13. And just so you guys know, this is handout number 19, even though it says class 21. It should say 19 on it. I'm pretty sure I put it in there. Nope, did not. I apologize. Sorry about that. Okay, so if you just want to work on the questions, give you guys about 2 minutes and then I'll go over them. Got some practice questions there. Bless you. Okay. The interest rate written in terms of bond indenture is also known as all three of them. We, for some reason in the English language, like to have multiple words for the same thing, just so we can confuse people. Number two, when the interest payment dates of a bond are May 1st and November 1st, and a bond issue is sold on June 1st, so they've sold it after the interest payment, the amount of cash received by the issuer will include interest for May to June. An early extinguishment of bonds payable, which were originally issued at a premium, is made by purchase the bonds between interest dates. At the time of reacquisition, any costs issued in the bonds must be amortized up to purchase date. That's true. The premium must be amortized up to the purchase date. That's true. And interest must be accrued from the latest interest date. So And answer is D. Corporation borrowed money from a bank to build a building. The long-term note signed by the corporation is secured by a mortgage that pledges title to the building as security of the loan. Corporation is to pay the bank $80,000 each year for 10 years to repay the loan. Which of the following relationships can you expect to apply for this situation? The balance of mortgage payable, at a given balance sheet date will be reported as a long-term liability. So that's partially correct, right? What else might we be listing this as? Right, so you'd have a short-term note due for 80,000, and then the rest of it would be in long-term, depending on where you were. So that's why that's not correct. The balance of mortgage payable will remain constant over the 10-year period. So that only remains that on a lump sum payment at the end, not when you're making payments, right? Anybody bought a car here? No. No. So the way the car works, it's very similar to the way that we're talking about here. Initially, those payments go mostly to interest, but as the principal comes down, the interest is decreased and decreased, and more of your payment goes towards principal. And so the mortgage does not remain the same. The amount of interest expense will decrease each period the loan is outstanding, while the portion of the annual payment applied to the loan principal will increase each period. That is correct. The debt instrument with no ready market is exchanged for property whose fair value is currently indeterminable. So we're swapping something and we don't have a fair value for either of those. And so what we have to do is take the present value of the debt instrument using an imputed interest rate. And remember what the imputed interest rate was? It's the rate that we would pay on a similar debt, or if we don't have similar debt, the rate in the market that we would pay for that similar debt. Any questions on those 5 questions? Okay, so I pulled this out of your book. It just talks about the types of bonds out there. Couple that you should probably be aware of: convertible. Convertible bonds can be changed into securities, usually common stock. And so that's why they tend to be used with startup companies. So startup companies are kind of high risk. And of course, if you invest in a company, you risk that investment. So rather than own stock, they would rather own debt or preferred stock. And why is that? Because of the pecking order if they fail. So if a company fails, your debt holders and your preferred stockholders get their piece of the pie, whatever is left over, before the common stockholders. So that's why companies like to do convertible securities, because what happens is, and I don't know exactly the timing, but if you have these securities, when that company goes public, you can turn your debt into shares, and that will make you wealthy beyond, most of our wild dreams. So convertible ones are good. Again, they're used mostly on new companies, startups, things like that, where the person might see your company struggling, but wants to make sure that they're going to get paid. Callable bonds are pretty straightforward, secured and unsecured, whether or not they're backed by an asset, that kind of thing. So they're all there. It's a great reference. Now we talk about bond discount. And so this means the issuer receives less than face value. the market determined that the rate of interest was not high enough for the risk. So bond issuances take 6 months to a year. First, you got to go out and you got to find a bank. And these banks typically are investment banks. So not necessarily like Bank of America, but it's investment branch, which I think is Merrill. You know, Goldman Sachs, those types of companies. What they do is they set up bonds for companies. So a company will come to them and say, I'd like to issue some bonds. I'd like to do it in the next year. This is what I want to do. And what they do is they do all the paperwork, they arrange everything, and they get buyers lined up, that kind of thing. And so because it takes 6 months to a year, when they set the interest rates, they set it a while ago. And we all know what happens to interest rates, right? Or hopefully. So I think you're right in what you said, but give me 1 second with that. The interest rates change, of course, right? So we've seen a 0.5 point decrease recently in the interest rates. So let's say I'm doing this, I set it at 7.5%. That interest rate has dropped 0.5%. Hopefully that market would adjust, right? And so I might only have to pay 7%. So that's why you see things like a discount and a premium, because they can't set the interest rate on the day that they issue the bonds, because they're written documents and they count. So now what you were saying is, in general, the higher interest rate means that the market determines that it's more risky. And so, yes, they demand a higher interest rate. Now you have bond company, or excuse me, you have the investment banks, they do their work and it takes a little while, but you also have ratings agencies. So like Moody's and Standard and Poor's, they also rate the debt. And so usually you'll get a rating, let's say it's AA. You would look at AA debt and you'd say, okay, what's this rate now? You'd set it up, and of course 6 months it's going to change. So you're going to have a discount or a premium. Now, for some examples, we'll have bonds at par. That just means at 100%, there's no discount or premium. So the premium now is, of course, the opposite. Issuer receives more than face value. The market determined that the rate of interest was too high for the risk. Okay. For bonds at par, this means they'll sell at 100, which, think about it as a percentage or just a dollar. So selling at 100 means it's selling at 100%. If they sell less, it'll sell at 90. If they sell for more, it'll sell at over 100. All right. So less than 100, discount. More than 100, premium. Okay. So our entry is a debit, cash, or asset, and then credit, bonds payable. And this is for the face value. You always record bonds at face value. And then, of course, you have the accrual of interest, so interest expense. And then your credit would be to interest payable. These would be between dates. And remember, interest expense is calculated using, I should, hold on a second. The interest expense is calculated using the principal and multiplying by the yield or market percent. Of interest. So principal times rate times time. Hopefully you remember that formula. Okay, so what does an entry look like when it's issued at a discount or premium? So at a discount, you have debit, cash, or asset. Debit, discount on bond payable. This is the difference between cash received and the bond amount. And then you credit bond payable. Bonds sold at a discount will have higher interest expense than face value of the bonds. Amortization of the discount adds expense. Now at a premium, debit cash or asset, credit bond payable, and then credit premium on bond payable. For the difference between cash and bond payable. Okay, straight line should not be used unless the amount is similar to the effective interest method or not material statements. Okay, this is the gap method. And it has steps. So determine the bond discount or premium. I think I took that off of your, do you have that chart? Oh, no, you do, okay. So an example would be, let's say you were gonna issue some bonds and they're for 348,500. Now, in order to, here, let me just type this out. Interest is 10%, and payment will be 4 payments of 100,000 starting on the day of borrowing. Okay, so we're going to be paying 100,000. We're going to pay it at the first of each year. And so this would be I don't know, did I have a number here for the years? No, I didn't. Okay. 1 year 1. And so we would have no interest expense, right? Because this is on the same day it occurs. And so we would amortize all of the discount. And so our new balance would be 248,500. Now we go to 1 year 2, and I'm ignoring adjusting entries here and making those types of things. Your cash paid is always going to be 100,000. So you want to put that in there for the number of payments that you're going to be making. And so it's 4 payments. Now we're going to calculate the interest expense. So we have 248,500, and we're going to multiply it by 0.1. And that equals 24,850. So now we take the 100,000 and we subtract the 24,850. I think that should be 75,150, but I don't have calculator with me, so give me 1 second. Okay, good. And so now here, I'm going to subtract that 75,150 from our total. And I get 223. Oh, no, that's not right. $248,500 minus 75,150. So I got 173,350. Okay. 1 year 3. And so I'd like you to do this year, and then I will fill it in. Okay, so what you do here is you take the 173, 350, you multiply it by 0.1, and that equals 17,335. And so we take the 100,000 payment and we subtract the 17,335. And we end up with 82,665. And so now I'll subtract the 82,665. And you get 90,685. And so our last payment, 1/1 year 4, we have interest of 9,069. And that's the 90,685 times 0.1. And so now we have 100,000 minus 9,069. And we should end up with 90,685. And what we do is we would adjust this payment for a few dollars down to get this exact number. And so we would just take that and make a payment of, 99,754. So that's what an effective interest table is like. And there's a couple different methods and a couple different ways to do it. I'm not going to try to confuse you on this one. You can see we got the 90,685 minus the 90,685, and so we end up with a zero balance here. Any questions? A little chart here. If you're looking for the amortization amount, it's kind of a quick shortcut. I do things mostly the long way and teaching you guys how to do it, but this is an option once you kind of get your bearings. And now I'll jump in and do examples 1 and 2. What I'd like you to do is read the question and see if you can pick out which numbers we're supposed to utilize. Okay. I know I didn't give you a lot of space here, so I apologize for that. I'm going to just make some notes here. The number of periods is equal to the number of years multiplied by the number of interest payments during the year. Interest expense, interest rate, use the yield for interest expense. Use the face amount to determine the interest payment. And then the interest rate must be adjusted for the number of interest payments. So if the interest is 10% and there are 2 payments of interest in a year, then use 5%, which equals the 10% divided by 2 for the number of payments. Okay, so the present I'll give you guys another few seconds there. Okay. So the present value of the principal is 6 million to be paid in 8 years with 2 times interest payments. So 8 times 2 equals 16 periods. Interest is, the bonds were sold to yield 8%. So divide by 2 periods or 2 payments. And the interest we're going to use is 4%. So this is the present value of a single payment for 16 periods. And so we take the 6 million and we multiply it by 0.534. And that number is 3,204,000. And so that answer is A. Okay. Now you also have to calculate the present value of the interest payments. So first we have to calculate the interest payments. So we have 6 million times the rate is 6%. So times 0.06. And then we're going to multiply that times the time. And this is 1 year. So it'll be 12 months over 12 months, which is just 1. So it doesn't change anything. And so that's 360,000. And so we divide by 2. Because there are multiple payments of interest. So we have 360,000 divided by 2, and that equals 180,000. And so now we need to find the present value factor for an annuity with a 4% interest rate over 16 periods. And so we go up here and we present value of an annuity for 16 periods. 16 periods. and that's 11.652. So we take that 11.652, we multiply 180,000 by 11.652. And we end up with 2,097,360. Any questions? Okay, so you've got practice number 1. And keep in mind, all this does is just do both parts. So you just have to do these calculations from example 1 and 2 for here. So take about 5 minutes. You can talk to each other. If you have any questions, wave me over. I'll walk around. While you're doing that, I'll leave that up in case anybody needs to get any more off of there. In another minute. I'm gonna come around and ask you what you got. Or just tell me what answer you have. If you don't have an answer, just kind of look at me and go, "Nope." Where'd you guys go? Okay, I'll go through it. All right, so the key we want is that we want to yield 5%. And we have interest semi-annual on June 30th and December 31st. So our interest rate for the effective interest method would be to take the 5% and divide by 2, and so that's 2.5%. Number of periods, 5 times 2, and so that's 10. So we're going to need the present value of an annuity for the interest payments, and we're going to need the lump sum payment for 71,820. So our face value, 5 million, we're multiplying that by 0.78120. And we get 3,906,000. And then we have to calculate our payment. So 5 million is the interest payment. And now we're going to use 0.06 because that's the face value and that determines the interest. And we can go ahead and divide this by 2 because we only want half a year's payment and we get 150,000. We multiply that by 8.75206. And that equals 1,312,809. And so we total both present values and we get 5,218,809. And so that is C. Any questions there? Okay, I've got a few like example 3 that I'll go through. It says a company issues 15 million, 7.8%, 20-year bonds to yield 8% on January 1, 2019. Interest is paid on June 30th and December 31st. The proceeds from the bond are 14,703,108 dollars. Using straight line amortization, what is the carrying value of the bonds on December 31st, 2021? So this is 2 years time? No, 3 years, 19, 20, and 21. Okay, so what first is our discount? So we take the 15 million, we subtract what we received, 14,703, 108, and our discount is 296. I'll find it in a second. 892. So now you divide 296, 892 by the number of periods. And so here we have 20-year times 2 times a year. And so that's 40 periods. So we take the 296, 892, and we divide it by 40. And that tells us that's 7,422 discount amortized with each payment of interest. So we had 3 years times 2 times a year. And so that's 6 periods. And so we're going to multiply 6 times 7,422. And I get 44,532, which we add 14,703,108 plus the 44,532, and that gives us 14,747,642. Any questions? Let's take a look at example 4. So it's mostly the same information, except for now they're issued on January 1, 2020. So a company issues, and we want to know what is the interest expense using straight line amortization for 2021. Okay, and so our interest expense is calculated by adding the discount to the premium, to the interest paid. And so here, 15 million times 0.078, and we want to do for the full year. And so I get 1,170,000. And then you have 7,422. We're going to multiply it by 2 because there's 2 periods in a year. And so I'm going to add 14,844. And so our total, 1,184,845. Okay. Now I would like you to do the effective interest method here. So we're going to start with 14,703,108. And this is on 6/1/2020. And so on 6/30/2020, we have our cash paid, right? 585,000. Our interest expense, 14,703,108, and we have to look at what we're supposed to be yielding. And we're supposed to be yielding 8%. So we multiply that by 0.08 divided by 2 because we want the 6 months. And we get 588,124. So now we take the 588,124 and subtract the 585,000 payment. And that equals 3,124, which we will add 3,124 to this balance and end up with 14,706,232. Now I'd like you to calculate the 12/31/2020 line. And just keep in mind that your cash paid is always going to be the 585,000. Okay, so hopefully you took the 14,706,232 and multiplied it by 0.04, which is just 0.08 divided by 2. And hopefully you got 588,249. Now we don't have to go any further. We can total interest expense for 6/30, 588,124, and for 12/31, and that's 588,249. And so the total is going to be 1,176,373. And this would go 3,249 and 14,709,481. Keep in mind when you're doing this, if you have a discount, we're going to be working it back up to the total. If you have a premium, we're going to be working down to the total. Okay. Any questions on that one? Okay, now you guys should be able to answer number 6 just by kind of peeking at it, because we've already done everything that needs to be done. What's our carrying value as of December 31, based on this chart? I mean, yeah, December 31, 2020. Good. I've got some for you to practice on. And we're almost done. So let's try number 2. I'll give you like, 3-ish minutes. If you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'll come around. I'm gonna grab a water while you guys are doing that. Oh, man, I don't have the answer on the paper. I'm gonna have to make something up. It's C. It's always C. All right, so what's our carrying amount of the bonds? Good, excellent. 2,154,000. And you say 500? 500, yep. Okay. Remember our interest expense here, we want to yield 10%. And so we have to figure out the cash paid. So that's 2 million. And we're multiplying it by 0.12. And then we're going to multiply by, or we're going to divide that by 2 because we want the half-year interest period. Really don't have the answer to this one. So I multiply it by 0.12 and then divide that by 2. And so cash paid, 120,000. Your interest expense, 2,154,500. And you're gonna multiply it by 0.1. So 215,450. Oh yeah, you're right. I should do it up here. 0.1 divided by 2. Thank you. $107,725. And so the discount 120. Actually, this is a premium, right? We got 120 minus 107,725. And that's 12,275. And so now we're going to subtract 12,275. And we get 2,142,225. So now we put the 2,142,225 in here. Again, we multiply by 0.05. And we get 107,111. The 120 minus 107,111. It's 12,889. And so we're going to subtract 12,889. And we end up with 2,129,336. So the first one says, using the effective interest method of amortization, interest expense for 2020. And so this would be, what's it, 630? 6.30.2020. And this would be 12.31.2020. And so we just add 107,725 plus 107,111. And I think that's 214,836. B. Darn it. My always C fails me. Now what I would do, because I didn't really give you much room for practice 3 here, you can kind of just put the numbers in the bottom of this chart. And so you can do practice 3 there. Keep in mind that the numbers change here. I'll give you about 3 minutes for that one. Here we add interest expense. 138,400 plus 139,320. And that equals 277,720. So the answer is C. And I got one last one that I can come through pretty quick. So this is that discussion from the question on the first page. Purchasers pay an additional amount of interest they are not entitled to in order to make the interest a whole payment. So bondholders, the issuers don't recalculate the payments. They just send out the payments. And so you'll get a full payment later, even though you've paid for the interest on the first month or 2 months here. So it says the company issues 20,000 or 20 million of 10-year 9% bonds on March 1, 2020 at 97 plus accrued interest. So we've got 20 million times 0.97 and that's 19,400,000. And then we have the interest payments, a portion of it, 20 million. You're a little early. You got 2 minutes. 20 million times 0.09. And it's 2 months. And so that's 300,000. And so you take the total and you would pay 19,700,000. So it's a pretty substantial chunk. I mean, they've got to front up to buy these bonds, 300,000 in interest. Now they'll get it back because they'll get a full interest payment when, you know, whatever date, June 30th, they'll get a full interest payment. So they'll get the 180,000 and it'll net out, or sorry, 1.8 million, and at the 3 million, the 300,000 will net out. Any questions? Ooh, I got you guys out on time. Have a great day. We'll do part 2 and we'll have the in-class group work question. Have a great day.